follow the same system of grading. So there can be numerous variations. We think that the every distance system is following the same system of grading, but it may be not correct or right. There can be numerous variations, but the basic principle that the final grade be computed on the basis of learner's performance. Learner's performance in the final exam, and this examination is also qualitative and quantitative in function. So all the study center usually um, follow the quantitative and qualitative examination pattern. So uh, um, in conclusion, we can say that teaching learning process in the distance education, we identified the distance tutor as an examiner, and granted that the course unit and assignment response and examination have their respective counterparts in the form of chapter text exercise written by the learner and corrected by the teacher, and also the semester examination held in the held like the conventional system. So the counterpart of the classroom teaching teacher is not clearly defined in the distance examination. So, the general instruction of the classroom teacher is um, uh, the information. The general function of the classroom teacher is the information in the classroom situation. The information in the classroom session that a textbook is given is not alone not affect the learning. Only the textbook in the classroom is not the effective learning. We know that the teacher is should be a facilitator and a motivator for the learner. So the textbook cannot always replace the teacher. In the classroom, also can say that in the classroom situation, textbook is not the alone replacement of the teacher. The information presented in the textbook becomes the knowledge of the learner through active agency of the classroom teacher. And here the teacher is the motivator and the teacher is the facilitator who create interest among the learners for the textbook and to acquire the knowledge whatever inside the textbook. So the teacher is believed to effect the transformation with the help of explanation and also with the help of demonstration. So the explanation and demonstration it may be elaboration. So by the phases of explanation, elaboration, and demonstration, the teacher can be transform the knowledge towards the learners. And the teacher always smiles and scolds towards the learner and contribute to the process of transformation. And also, in the Indian situation, we can hardly think of a public examination which doesn't show a good percentage of failure. If the teaching of the classroom teacher were the only factor responsible for a learner's success, there should be no failure of the kind we just mentioned. So, the more important factor is the learner himself or herself. In the before module, you saw that the learner is the center, and the learner is himself or herself being motivated and make study skill and reading habits in the distance learning system. So this fact is reiterated and time again and again when we look into newspaper for the result of the examinations. The results seems to suggest that the question is less of the classroom teacher's instruction than of the learner process of learning. So the way here the learner learns, the learner capacity for learning, and the attitude to learning, and the other learner central factor as much more significant. So learner, we are now that we are in a learner centered approach system, and it is a paradigm shift. The teach from the teacher centered approach to the learner centered approach, then the learning centered approach. So we are now in a day where the learning approach is uh, everywhere uh, followed. So in the learning center approach, both uh, teacher and the students are the part of the system, and sometimes the teachers learn from the learner, and sometimes the learner learns from the teacher. It is a two-way process. So the learning center approach is now prevailing in all the institutions. It may be a distance or it may be a conventional systems. So learners should also be able to learn in non-classroom situations, and so-called the facilitator or the teacher inspire the learner and play the role of the facilitator. Um, So how to identify a distance tutor? How we can identify a distance tutor? We know that a classroom teacher helps the learner to communicate with written material presented to them as a bit of the information, or with the material delivered orally, or a referred material, in the library, and go to the library and follow the book, or but a distance teacher, here a distance teacher, uh, um, mm, through the distance teacher, um, the theoretical level, the is most in this unit the distance, how to identify the distance teacher, the her in his counterpart, a teacher who comes to the classroom, and therefore by implication inform, guide, inspire, at least help the learner, and motivate the learner. uh, Basically we said that the distance tutor who works through an assignment response or a letter maybe choose not write any comments, reply at all. So most significantly, the implication of this contrast is that distance tutor is to help the learner should not rest control with the scribbling a grade at the top of an assignment response. The distance teacher must find a way to communicate with and help the learner respond to the course units. By not writing any comments on the assignment response in spite of having graded them. And the distance tutor ceases to be an effective tutor and exists as a mere examiner who grade or mark the assignment response and is not called upon to explain his style. So, what could be the possible reason for such indifferences? They might be as follows: that distance tutor does not like his work and is working under some kind of compulsion, and he or she does not really read the assignment response but grade them to record and avert evidence of having. done his or her duty. He or she read the assignment response but does not have enough time to write his or her comments, and also it does not realize how significant his or her comments are from the pedagogical point. And also, he or she does not know what comments to make and how to put them across. So, often so happen that academic staff are seconded from the parent departments of conventional university to the director of correspondence or distance education. If a particular teacher is not happy about the secondment, uh, for whatever reasons, he or she tends to be indifferent to work at the directorate. So neither of these problem has pedagogical solution as they are in the essence of administrative problem. The obvious solution is that unwilling teachers should not be seconded for distance teaching. So teacher must be uh, a enthusiastic teacher, and he or she have great interest towards the learner. Then after he can be a facilitator and can be a motivator to the distance learner. The tutor into the tutor is feeling inclined and feeling sympathetic towards the learner, and then after he or she can be a better tutor. Then we have to discuss what are the significance characteristics of a tutor comment. There may be several different types of communication between the tutor and the learner. The tutor comments are of undoubtedly significance to distance education as they are both the content and the vehicle of communication which affect learning. So as to effect the gradual initiation of learner into the way to distance education, the tutor has to be aware of the three characteristics that three communication. That first one is academic communication, and second one is personal communication, and third one is supplemental communication. There are three types of communications can a teacher play between the teacher and the learners. So first one is the academic communication. And the academic level, the function of the distance teacher is read the assignment response, write comments on the answer and response, and also evaluate the answer responses by grading or marking. Okay. So it is both all the three are very important for the learner, and the first one is academic communication, and in the academic communication the learner Further, distance teach effectively, the tutor must understand each learner. Uh, that's why the distance tutor become a good facilitator, or whatever he or she wants to be do with the learner can be achieved. So, unlike a classroom teacher who addresses a collective mass of learner, the distance teacher or tutor has to address every learner individually. So we focus on each learner of learning and learning center approach. In the learner center approach and learning center approach, each and every child is important and each and every learner is important. So here the tutors address every learner individually. A major way is to write comments in the assignment responses. The teacher or tutor must correct the learner and for guidance where the learner want and or she may have gone wrong. Elaborate on what he or she may have attempted summarily and point out the confirm the acceptance aspect of his or her response and assess the level of the learner's achievement and explain the basis of that assessment so as to ensure better learner performance in the future. So it is the duty of the tutor to repeat all the above mentioned tasks over and over again with every learner. This certainly is work that demands great attention as well as patience. Let us elaborate on this. The tutor has to be conscious of the fact that the distance learner is isolated from his or her peer and in most cases an adult with several social commitments and domestic responsibility. We know that also, we already know that. Consequently, here she is more susceptible to anxiety and sometimes slackness and frustration and therefore may suffer from one or more of the following handicaps. That are isolation from other learners seem to hang heavy on a distance learner. And the feeling that other learners think, work and achieve differently may have a dampening effect on his or her enthusiasm and work. Isolation from the tutor builds discontent and invariably accompanies the feeling that one can impress one's teacher better in a face-to-face learning situations. So a long time gap between the points raised by the learner and the corresponding clarification received may slacken interest and enthusiasm. So enthusiasm is the very good part of the tutor and also it motivates the learner. Since in most cases no two learners can compare their assignment responses. The scope for healthy competition or peer group interaction is minimal. So distance learner has to depend mainly on the written word. So he or she must be able to exploit it to the maximum for comprehension as well as utilizations. So tutor who should help the learner to overcome difficulties caused by isolation and make his or her communication through written comments and academically usual. Such attitude and feelings might be genuine, but they can prove to be real hurdles in the distance education. It seems like genuine, but it creates hurdles in the distance education and may lead the tutor to think that the learner is trying to flatter him or he her in order to gain better grades. Further, the root of such attitude may be traced back to the learner's social status, family background, occupation, previous academic achievement. No distance learner can avoid being influenced by the fact. Supplemental communication. This is the personal communication, and then we discuss the supplemental communication. The communication at the academic and personal level gives rise to third level of communication, which may be called the supplemental level of communication. Such communication may emanate either from of learners or form of teachers. In the former case, a learner might want to question a particular comment written by a teacher or ask for an explanation regarding a grade, award, or a remark on the assignment response. In the latter case, the tutor may discover that the particular assignment is difficult and most learners need help in handling it. In such a situation, model answer or such hints as would help learners must be prepared and made available to them. It may be a word of caution, therefore, in order to make the system work efficiently, it is advisable to monitor the work of tutor and remind them from time to time of a standard they are expected to maintain. Such an approach should provide ways and means for learner to comment on the course unit and the work their tutors. The tutors themselves might come up with constructive suggestions regarding course unit or the system as a whole. So we have covered the individual communication, personal communication, supplemental communications. Sorry, academic communication, personal communication, and also supplementary communication. Then we have to discuss type of tutor comments. What are the type of tutor comments? The distance education uses a many media as an institute can possibly afford and manage. The multimedia package, the greater bulk of material depends on print. In fact, the most home study program conducted the world over use written course unit as the major channel of transmission. And that is the only channel in most distance education in our country. So we hope we have adequately answered the question we raised. Let us now consider the following extracts which have been selected from comments actually written by on-train distance teacher working on assignment responses. So these are some examples. Horrible language. Sometimes the tutor comment in the learner's assignment that horrible language. Pay some more attention to your language. You have written about boss. Try to avoid the jargon if it is not clear to you. What do you mean by this? Where is the illustration? Is that all there is to say? Do you think you have put in all the relevant information? Read the topic of the assignment again and go back to the teaching unit. Please go through the lessons once again and also the question in the assignment. Since you must fulfill the criteria of effective language teaching material, you have been awarded an A grade. You can improve the organization of your answer. So you could improve your answer by spending more time on it. Please read the question again. It seems you have not fully understood. A lot of unnecessary material has crept in. Read the answer again and strike out all the necessary details. Go through the lesson once again. You have some problems with the language about which you need not very much. Your answer is a faithful summary of the lesson. You have not followed the question at all. Is this necessary here? Please read the lesson once again and redo the assignment. Examples and illustration are okay, but one example could have served the purpose. Beginning of the essay is quite good. Try to keep up the same level. These are some examples of commenting of the tutor in the for the assignment of the lesson. So comments are different types. Harmful comments, hollow comments, misleading comments. The harmful comment. Consider comment like horrible language. They not only start hating the tutor concerned, but also become indifferent to the subject. We know that from our childhood, but whenever our teacher uh, provide positive reinforcement towards our activity, we carry the activity regularly, and we are very much interested to do more and more. But whenever the teacher discourages us to doing the activity, we feel very sad and do not do it further. So whenever they only start hating that, whenever the harmful comment is given to the tutor, that is given to the learner start hating the tutor concern, but also become indifferent to the subject. As a result, they drop out of the course. So other may write back objecting to the rude remark of the tutor. Most of the cases, the tutor justify the remark, but that does not serve the purpose. In hollow comments, for example, please go through the lesson once again and also the question in the assignment. Appears to be an instruction. It appears to be an instruction, but it is not clear what is going to happen and how and how and what the tutor want to say. It is not clear. So misleading comments. The learner is asked to read the lessons. For example, let us consider comment 18. The learner is asked to read the lesson once again. In all probably, he or she will follow the direction honestly, read the lesson once again, and then redo the assignment. But since the mistake weakens, so weaknesses in his or first attempt not pointed out, they are likely to be repeated. So the comments should be very particular and it should be very clear to understand for the learner. So far we have talked about three types of comments: harmful, hollow, and misleading. For obvious reason, the tutor should take care not to write such comments like hollow, like harmful or misleading comments. And all comments. These comments include all type of non-verbal remarks. That is question mark. It may be a question mark. It may be double question mark. It may be double check mark or underline or side brackets. These symbols seemingly indicate that answer has been read by the tutor, but they are not helpful to the learner. So why the question mark is given and what is the actual meaning or purpose of this question mark? How what should be the learner to modify or rectify in his or her assignment? They do not decode. The learner do not cannot decode them and in fact cannot do so. So the distance tutor therefore does not necessarily have to research symbol a particular teaching type of comment is to be repeated. By all means of comment may be repeated. Of course, the time needed for this purpose must be available to the tutor. Then negative comments. Such comments which negate facts, concept, explanation, illustration, analysis, elaborations, and the relevance of the content of an answer, or the very approach to a particular problems presented by the distance learner. In the assignment response may be termed negative comments. The comments may be written in the margin beside the particular fact. The tutor will have to explain why a particular answer is incorrect. One might have to supply written or prepared answers, illustrations, or examples to support his or her stance. Then positive comments. Such comments encourage the distance learner to repeat and better his or her performance. Because of the realization that he is on the same wavelength as the tutor and to repeat the achievement as many times as possible. It is these comments that actually result in and then further mutually advantageous communication between the tutor and the learner. So positive comments are very useful and motivating for the learner. So they are then constructive comments. They are immensely helpful. Uh, Constructive comments are very helpful in effecting purposeful deductive communication. Then global comments. Spelling, syntax, legibility. Perhaps the most important function of this class of the comment is to explain the grades. So, grades and the reasons behind it, whether it is an A or C. If every assignment response is returned with a comment on the grade, it bears there is a greater possibility of improve the learner. The learner can easily compare his or her performance by the grading. Then personal comments. The distance tutor who intend to build communication with the learner on a personal level need to have the following extra academic attributes like a very high degree of patience, a feel for the appropriate placement of personal comment, a certain degree of linguistic sophistication which is required to successfully blend academic comments, instruction, and information into an intimate whole. A distance tutor may write as many personal comments as possible, but we believe that even a single well placed and appropriately worded comment of this kind for assignment response will go a long way in breaking the isolation of the distance learning. In your module, there is an example of tutor comments that this is a very thoughtful and uh, perceptive essay. You have uh, were very uh, systematically set out the essential points and you have conveyed the spirit and the practice of the uh, mentor approach very effectively. You are, I think, one need to be think in terms of gradual acquisition, perhaps with a rota system of work The basic principle can, to some extent, be applied with an imaginative approach, even if the school is not fully equipped. This is a comment of tutor, and the grade is A, and the unit 6. And tutor comment is further divided into two types: non-teaching class and teaching class. And it is we have already discussed healthy comment. We already discussed about the non-teaching class and teaching class of the tutor comments. Now we have completed the unit 1 of the module 3. Then we go for the unit 2, that is tutor through correspondence. After completion of this, after completion of this unit, you can inform you about some fallacies which continue to stand in the way of the successful functioning of the distance education, and identify the significant biases which stand in the way of successful two-way communication between distance learner and distance teacher. Suggest means of overcoming these fallacies and biases. We, we know that there are various obstacles or various difficulties to continue or become successful in the distance education system. So here in this unit, there are some suggestions for overcoming these fallacies and biases. After having studied and worked throughout the unit, you can identify the source or cause of the fallacies mentioned above, and identify and explain the biases we have talked about. Overcome these drawbacks to cater the much needed two-way communication or pedagogical purposeful. So to achieve this aim, we shall be guided by a few experiments and the conclusion drawn from them. So the advantage is going so is that we will be able to present some supporting evidences for whatever difficulty we may identify, and also for whatever solution we may suggest. So consequent upon, we hope you will be convinced that such difficulties really do exist in the distance education system, and that can be resolved, and you realize that, and you believe that, and you immensely believe that there is a there can be a success. It can be a successful distance teaching. And what are the tasks and problem in distance teaching? In unit one, I suggest that distance teaching consists mainly of academically useful conversation between the distance learner and the distance teacher. So, what are the tasks for the distance teacher? The task of the distance teachers are compensate for the weakness of the unit lesson and the assignment. Compensate for the weakness of the unit. Then break the isolation of the distance learner. Then sustain the distance learner motivation and evaluate and grade the assignment response. And to help the distance learner in improving and advancing his or her learning through purposeful comments. Then answer the question raised by the distance learner. These are all the tasks done by the distance teacher. These six tasks put together constitute the process of distance teaching. And in other words, to perform the task of distance teaching successfully, distance teachers have to perform certain basic tasks that called minor tasks and also approach their work with a certain required state of mind. If they do not perform the minor task, they cannot perform the major task successfully. So step by step, they follow the minor task, and after completion of the minor task, they can easily follow the major task. And they do not also approach if they do not complete the minor task, they do not complete the major task successfully, and also do not also approach their work in the required state of mind. So, what are the difficulties involved in distance teaching? In distance teaching, there are very various difficulties, a number of difficulties faced by the teacher and faced by the learner also. Let us discuss. There are various problems like a qualified academic trained teacher or experienced teacher in handling face-to-face teaching and learning situations. Uh, Face-to-face classroom may not necessarily function as a successful and effective distance teacher. He or she needs certain specific skills to do so. Another difficulty is, besides acquiring the skills specifically needed for the distance teaching, the prospective distance teacher must overcome his or her unconscious culturally induced bias. If the respective distance teacher is made aware of those biases, help to overcome them, and also give him the specific skills needed for his or her new job. Here we see SEO to prove successful as a distance teacher. So to identify these problems, the psychologist called 1981 worked with a group of 50 prospective distance teachers who were adequately qualified in their subjects of specialization and also trained in the technique of face-to-face teaching. These trainees were made to undergo a 30-hour training program spread over 20 days. The training program uh, comprised the training program comprised some lectures, reading assignment, take home assignment, workshop sessions, discussion, prepare of report, and evaluation of the course material and the assignment. And the whole program is divided into three phases. The first phase is pre-teaching task. Second phase is teaching task, pre-teaching task, teaching stack, and post-teaching task. Pre-teaching stacks, there are problems and solution presented in this unit. Then, in the teaching task, problems and solutions, and in the post-teaching stacks, problem and the solution. So, preparing to distance teacher two-way communication. mm, the learner should be motivated, but sometimes the tutor face the demotivated learners, and the learner also make them demotivated towards the distance education. So what are the problem in the motivation? It began with the instruction that henceforth all of them should consider themselves distance teachers, and that whatever task was assigned to them, they should be performed with this role in mind. Though their perception of what a distance teacher should or should not do in a particular situation. So all the work were driven by their mindset. So in the workshop session, they were asked to study a teaching unit which was prepared for actual distance learners and to prepare a brief outline of its content which could be used to distance teach the learner for whom the unit was prepared. The first step in distance teaching is to study the teaching unit to get acquainted with its actual content, its scope, and the depth of treatment. It is not suggested that distance teacher has to learn the content already is a subject expert. So there could be three possible reasons why why the trainee may have shown complete or partial disinterest in this exercise. So, had the trainee been informed in explicit terms, and they were to read the unit with a view to correcting assignment responses based on the unit, they would have studied it thoroughly. As the theme of the unit was familiar to all the trainee, it may not have attracted their attention. The trainee had little motivation to do the task and were thus not favorably inclined even to take the very first step in the process of distance teaching to study the teaching unit and prepare a brief content outline. So, if the topic was familiar and therefore held no attraction for some reader, it should have been so for all. So, it is a trainee center, unlike the first two reasons, and see that depending upon the degree of their motivations. The trainee either did or did not study the unit properly. Obviously, the problem of motivation or the desirable attitude are not exclusively learner-centered issues. Then problem of isolation. It was explained that a checklist consists of the following points. Are there any access device built into the unit? If so, are they effective? How the objective of the unit been started? If so, are they explicitly and clearly stated? Does the content agree with the objective? Does the structure of the unit conform to the principle of course design? If it does it promise to contribute the maximum possible to the learning process? Does the content produce? What is the nature of the presentation features of the unit? Are they pedagogically useful? These are the some checklists to explain the problem of the isolations. It was suggested that the above checklist should be used for an adequate assessment of any course unit. So it was used to evaluate the given unit that they were working. So to perform this task, the group of trainees was divided into 15 smaller groups, with at least 3 trainees in each group. So which was then asked to perform the following three tasks. First one is read the same unit more carefully than before. Discuss the content and the various features of the unit. Prepare a report on the strength and weaknesses of the unit. Obviously, the various groups interpreted the unit and its structure differently insofar as the points of emphasis in the reports prepared by them different differed quite clearly, and some of the groups were not ready to change their stand even after they are allowed time to discuss the issue among themselves once again. This exercise points to the fact that a distance teacher may take a definite and rigid personnel, and so the isolation as indicated by the disagreement mentioned above is a serious issue. In most cases, various distance teachers will be working on the same unit with hundreds of the learners. So these distance teachers need to interrupt the units in nearly the same way. Otherwise, differing messages will go to different groups of the learner. So one way to overcome this difficulty is that the structure of the unit be clear, thematic presentation be unambiguous, and that provision be made for giving an adequate orientation to distance teacher wherever necessary. This brings in a strong argument for training distance teachers before they are commissioned for the task of distance teaching. Problem of study skills. There are various problems regarding study skills. After a long discussion, we succeeded in effecting convergence in the case of a number of divergent views. At every stage of this discussion, the course unit, writer's view, and the objective of the unit were used as focal reference points. Consequently, a collectively agreed upon understanding of the structural and thematic components of the unit was accomplished. During this long discussion, it was realized that at least one of the reasons for divergent view and reports was the difference is the level of study skills which the trainee brought into use of prepare those reports. Obviously, we know that no two people can have exactly the same range of study skills. But if the differences in study skills are going to affect in interpretation of units, something needs to be done to help the positive distance. So sorry, to help the prospective distance. Teachers. Which again point to the proposal that they need to be trained. Once again, we need to remind ourselves that study skills do not pose problems only for learners. They also pose for problems for the distance teacher. This, however, it is not suggest that conventional teachers do not face problems. In fact, face them as well as, but we need not go outside in the contest. So, then summative comments. It is commonly believed that distance learners face the problems of motivation, isolation, and of a lack study skills. So, having accepted this, it is suggested that distance teacher must help in distance learners overcome these problems. There is only a highly motivated distance teacher who can motivate his or her learner. So these fallacies pertaining to the three factors, that is motivation, isolation and study skills. So these fallacies pertaining to the three factors, that is motivation, isolation and study skills. So the trainee had to see and be convinced that not all of them would take interest in reading a teaching unit. Not all of them would assess the quality of unit accurately. It needed considerably effort to see the teaching unit from the viewpoint of the course unit writers. This attack was enforced by lectures and discussion arranged in between the various workshops. The themes touched upon were social acceptability and academic tenability of distance education, socio-economic significance of distance education, the question of equivalence with regard to face education and distance education. So the unit needs to be studied appropriately in terms of its theme as well as structure, and that they too face the problems of motivation, isolation and study skills, which they need to overcome if they want to function effectively as a distance teacher. So isolation motivation is most important part for a teacher to overcome these isolation and foster the motivations. Having handed over the copies of the assignment and those of the 9 responses to all training, at the same time we asked them to distance teach those learners. And now we have to discuss distance teaching as a four-step process. What is a four-step process? The distance teacher must understand what the assignment demands of the learner and build what may be called the assessor's ideal response. And having decided the ideal ideal uh, assessor's ideal responses, the distance teacher must be able to discover such weaknesses in the responses as might be traced back to the weaknesses defects of the assignment, and also the defects in the assignment and the teaching units, and also the assessor ideal response irrespective of the weaknesses of the assignment and the teaching unit. So assessment of the responses is likely to be biased, and most probably the comment will be um, lopsided. So the first one is the assessor ideal responses. The teacher must understand the assessor's ideal responses. And second, the weaknesses of assignment and the teaching unit. And the thirdly, the distance teacher has to consider the organizational aspect of the responses. It may be the language used, it may be the correctness and clarity, it may be the presentation of arguments. So all the three, uh, and these are the three steps of the distance teaching process. And the fourth one or the last one is to keep the distance learner motivated and break the walls of isolation and help the learner to improve his or her learning. So whatever may be the occasion of these comments, An explanation for the graded or awarded as reply to letter or representation. The distance teacher has to direct his or her efforts towards one aim, namely the effect of teaching successfully. So the three major difficulties that must be avoided or eradicated, that is to foster the learner's motivation and to avoid isolation and improve the learning skills. So what is the assessor or ideal response? The trainee had already gone through the unit thoroughly, and when they were asked to study the assignment and prepare a note indicating what each of them thought was the ideal response to the assignment, only 51 assessor ideal responses were collected, as seven of the trainees did not take part in this activity. So it is interesting, even in a sense of incredible, that uh, only four assessor ideal responses depicted an accurate understanding of the assignment. So it is quite likely that while assessing the assignment response, the uninitiated distance teachers will look at the assignment in terms of their own subject expertise rather than what is available and or intended in the unit or lesson concerned. So, one answer to this question is that the course writer prepare an outline of the ideal response and send it to the distance teacher to guide the learner in assessing the guide the tutor in assessing the responses. Another way is that the distance teacher is oriented towards using the lesson concern along with the corresponding assignment to build and deal response. So these are the guidance for the assessors. Then the assessors comment. What are the comments of the assessor or the tutor? After the trainee had finished writing, they were asked to assess and write comments on the first three of the nine responses we had given to them. So here in your module, page number 35, comments by initiated distance teachers, a profile is given. You can follow or refer it. So it is true that the comments on content, the language used, and the organization of the responses presented are desirable. Presented are desirable as they are pedagogically relevant, but unless they are constructive, they turn out to be the non-teaching types and serve no real purpose at all. So the writing of comments in such cases is a rare phenomenon, and once again, because his or unconscious culturally indeed bias of the tutor or the assessor, the uninitiated distance teacher feels most concerned with the content of a response and feels satisfied if he or she mark his or disagreement or disapproval. So that he or she has to write teaching type and global comment does not appear to him or her to have an importance. However, we can conclude that after just one trial may not be reasonable. Accordingly, we ask the trainee to take up another set of three assignment responses. So, for assessment and write comments on them. So, it is very beneficial to um, to ask the trainee to take up all other responses of all other another set of three assignment responses. Then how to improve didactic communication. Before the training started their second exercise, writing comments on the assignment responses. Uh, Write comments and try not to write harmful comments. And a table 2.1 and 2.2. 2 point, the table 2.135 and 2.2 in the page number 37 of your module. There is a comparison between table 1 and table 2. The comparison shows that there was no appreciable difference between the two attempts as far as the profile of the comments was concerned, except that no harmful comments were written. Refer your table number 2.3. Comment on the third set of response. Number of trainees who took part in the exercise, that is number of hollow comments 58, number of negative comments 92, and number of positive comments, that is 27, that is 11.8%. Number of constructive comments 23. Number of global comments, that is 28. Total number of comments 228, that is 100%. Here in table 2.3, there is the highest percentage of negative comments. And here you notice that global comments are written for the first time during the third exercise. The percentage of teaching type comment went up by 20.7%, and the percentage of negative comments went down by 21.1%, that is 61.5% to 40.4%. So the percentage of hollow comments recorded a marginal rise, and it is evident that uninitiated distance teacher cannot enter into purposeful communications with distance learner, and we conclude that from this evidence that uninitiated distance teacher cannot enter into purposeful communication with the distance learner. So a trained distance teacher, on the other hand, should be able to function purposefully right from the very beginning of his or her career. So now we completed the problem unit 2, and let's sum up that. We outline here the process of distance teaching, showing what difficulties may arise at different stages of the process and how those difficulties may be resolved, and the problems involved in grading and answering the questions. So now we will discuss about the unit 3. Unit 3. Uh, the objective of the unit 3 is to how a collectively uninitiated distance teacher may grade assignment responses and the problems that a distance teacher may have to face while assessing assignment responses. What possible solution we may work on to resolve these problems. And also after completion of this unit, you should able to avoid the pitfalls one faces while grading an assignment response and reduce the harm those pitfalls are likely to cause. In unit 2, you already know about the pre-teaching task and teaching task and post-teaching task. And the teaching task of writing purposeful comments. And also take about grading. So here distance teaching. Whether you consider learner at primary level, the secondary level, or university level, or those adults who take in service courses, the bright learners or the ordinary learners, all of them appear to show immense interest in what their teachers think of their performance. The learners always think about how his or her teacher think about his or her performance. So, if a learner receives a corrected assignment response, his or her first reaction is to pick for the grade, mark, or score. It is not unusual for a learner to get upset if the grade score is below. So, it is a usual way. In the classroom situation, the teacher concerned explains, in most cases, what may have gone wrong with an answer because of which it is scored a low grade. So, the distance teacher's grading way perfect. The comments reflect the grades appropriately. The distance teacher explains the grades awarded. Now we will discuss about perfect. What is a perfect grading? By perfect grading, we mean flawless grading, which implies that a response is awarded the grade which it actually deserves. To appreciate the dimension of these problems, we'll take you back to the group of training we introduced to you in the unit 2. So, what are the norms? Norms of grading. For the 9 responses with in your model, in the 41 pages, there are some example of grades awarded in exercise 1 and 2. So, here for the 9 responses which we used in this experiment, the norm were decided by a panel of 4 experts. Panel of 4 experts. These are 3 of them presented their review on an award for each of the 9 responses, and the fourth, after a consideration of these views and award, decided on the most appropriate grades for the 9 responses under considerations. So, what is the dispersion? Dispersion is the scattering of grades, and norm is the grade awarded to a response. So, for example, let there be a response which deserves a C grade. Its norm then is C. A particular assessor may award it an A. Then we shall say that in his or her grading there is a dispersion of 2 points. Similarly, if someone get B grade and particular assessor may award it as A, the dispersion is 1 point above the norm. That is, the dispersion is plus 2. Similarly, if the award made is E instead, then the dispersion is 2 points below the norm. So, in the former case, we say the award grade is plus 2 point away from the norm, and in the latter case, it is minus 2 points away from the norm. So, accordingly, the range of dispersion, that is the where n is the number of grade, number of assessor, and d is the distance n from the norm. The percentage of dispersion is n into 100, or range of the dispersion into 100, divided by the maximum possible end. So in table number 3.1, what is the depicts of the 45 trainees who participated in the exercise. 12 awarded A to respond number 1, 28 awarded it B, 1 awarded it C, and 4 awarded it D. Obviously, most trainees, 28 of them identified the loss. In this case, the response number 2, most trainees identified the norm. But in the case of response number 3, the grade awarded ranges from A to E on a 5-point scale, and the norm was identified by a small number of assessors. In such a situation, there does not seem to be any certainty that all the responses will be awarded the grades they actually deserve. This is a very disturbing problem which one has to face time and again when responses are given for assessment. Assignment consisting of the objective kind of questions will probably be marked assessed by the computer. So the problem is one of the tutor mark assignment. We must pause a moment and ask ourselves, why does such a thing happen? Answer to this question, we bring in the notion of discrimination factor. So we may define the discrimination factor as the factor which when favorably help the distance teacher in discriminating between a weak response and a good one, and between a good one and a better one, and the better one between the best one. When these factors are not favorably, they affect the teacher's judgment adversely. Some of these factors appear to belong to the distance teacher, that is perception. So discrimination factor affected by perception of the lesson, perception of the assignment, a tendency towards being lenient or strict, the ideal response to an assignment, and also the attention span. All are the discrimination factor. So for example, we could say that indifference and absolute carelessness on the part of the assessor can cause dispersion. An assessor's perception of the lesson. The first one is assessor's perception of the lesson. We have discussed this issue in detail in Unit 2. In our experiment, we have taken care of this factor by making the trainee go through the unit individually and then in groups, making sure that they knew for the certain what the unit was intended to achieve. So in this situation, we rule out any dispersion because of this factor. An assessor perception of the assignment. Having analyzed the assignment and identified its weaknesses and defects, we suggested that uh, assessor could compensate for those defects by treating the responses somewhat leniently, not punish a learner for error or fault, which may be there in the response because of defect in the assignment. So at this stage, we must explain that we mean by proximity movement. Proximity movement is a concept that helps in assessing whether or not a particular group of trainees has collectively improved their technique of assessment of response. Thus, we may conclude that a better understanding of the weakness of the assignment will result in better assessment in terms of grading the response. So, therefore, we may conclude that a better understanding of the weakness of the assignment will result in better assessment in terms of grading. Tendency towards being lenient or strict. So, table number 3.2 confirm that observation made above that as in the case of responses 4 and 5, assessor award grade ranging from A to E for what deserved a C grade. For what deserved a C grade. A superficial inference may be that some assessors can be very lenient and some are very strict. So, whatever my opinion or my scoring, this assignment is not equal to others, tutor or other assessors. So, here the assessment or grading differs from each other. So, but we need to disclose some vital information on this stage. So, obviously, the notion of being inherently lenient and strict need not worry us as assessor. The broad deviation in grading by this trainee seems to have its base in other factors. Having made sure that the trainee studied the unit thoroughly and also the assignment, we now turn to their individual ideal responses, which we had collected from them earlier. Differences among individually assessors' responses could be the cause for dispersion in grades, as every assessor will mentally use his or her assessor response as the yardstick. So once again, we discuss the assignment's component, its relative significance, and what weight it may have, how the assignment was related to the lesson unit concerned, and what might be expected from the learners, keeping in view the objective of the lesson unit, the weaknesses of the assignment and the lesson unit, and the types of learner taking the course. Now, attention span. It is an important factor. One possible conclusion is that in this particular group of training, mostly had an attention span of two responses. Since they could work with good concentration attention for the span of just two responses. By the time they took the third responses for assessment, their attention became weaker, which resulted in broader range of dispersion. Then summative comments. Discrimination factor will always remain major hurdles for the distance teacher to overcome. So obviously the most successful distance teacher is the one who consciously controls these factors. It is obvious that study units have to be studied thoroughly by the distance teacher, and he or she must see that their weaknesses and strengths are self-instructional material. Secondly, she must study the assignment critically to see whether or not it matches the objective of the study unit. And thirdly, the distance teacher uh, needs to decide what she may expect from the learner as a response. Lastly, she must find ways to increase his or her attention span. Effective distance teaching, the two need to have a strong correlation between them. To appreciate this point, we need to go to our data once again, which we present below in a different form. The inference is that there is no correlation between the comments written and the grades awarded. So, effective distance teaching, the two need to have a strong correlation between them. To appreciate this point, we need to go to our data once again, which is present below in the different form in the table 3.4. Your module it is present in the 3.4. The comments written should reflect the grades, and the grades awarded should suggest the kind of comments one may expect. So, queries about the grades and comments. Uh, there certainly are some cases when On receiving the evaluated response, the distance learner would like to know why or how the grade C was awarded and the comments that were written in the response. So most of the training said there their awards need to revision, maybe them defending their stand, also by whatever arguments they could think of, which included attacking the distance learner concern. It appears that once a grade is awarded or a comment written by an assessor, he or she finds it difficult to change his or her stand, even if she is convinced of the weakness of his or her stand. Therefore, professional honesty gets sacrificed in a class of ego. This class of ego stands as a barrier between the teacher and the learner, as the two fail to reach each other, and the process of distance teaching learning as a whole end in failure. Sometimes the ego supersedes and the distance teaching and learning become a failure. So in this connection, we must suggest that it is desirable on the part of the distance teacher and both the learner to give up being egoistic and thus weaken that barriers right from the very beginning. But then seer need to learn to do so. Personal comment promote academically purposeful communication between the teacher and the learner. They also help in reducing the possibility of classes caused by egoism. And the teacher should know that the teacher always be a student. If the teacher cannot consider himself or herself a teacher, a student, he would not build up his capacity. So every time we have to update our knowledge, every time we have to update our pedagogical skills. So I beforely said that now we are in the days of learning centered approach. In this learning centered approach, both the teacher and the learner are equally responsible for learning. And sometimes the learner learns from the teacher and the teacher learns from the learner. So the teacher always accept that he or she is a students every time and day by day gaining knowledge, he build up he or she build his capacity in a better way. So to avoid the egoism, and it is better to avoid egoism for successful teaching learning, successful distance teaching and learning. So now we have completed the unit 3, that is the how the grading system takes place, um, and what are the major problems and hurdles in the grading system, and how the relationship with grading system will affect the relationship of a teacher and the learner, and how to create a better grading system and better build up a better relationship in the distance learner and the teacher, and become a successful distance teaching learning process. So now we have to discuss here unit module 3 unit 4, the supplemental interaction. The objective of this units are analyze the inadequacy of an untrained distance teacher, use the region of supplemental communication in distance education, and identify the prerequisite which is distance teacher needs to teach effectively. Identify the way in which supplemental communication contributes to the effective two-way communication in distance education. Unit 1, we already covered the focus on the tutor comments and suggestions of tutor comments, And in Unit 2 and 3, what are the traditional issues pertaining to distance education? And today, in most cases, it is conventional teachers who are appointed as distance teachers, and they need to know what biases may hinder their work, as well as how and why. We try to show that it may not be possible to achieve absolute uniformity or objectivity of assessment in such cases. However, training and practice should help in reducing the degree of divergence, which might otherwise be very large. An additional suggestion made was that the study of such divergences should help the institution in identifying and replacing the assessors who are abnormally lenient or strict. So, discussion on the basis of a conventional teacher the justification that the common school and colleges teachers to raise such questions, and when called upon to function as distance teacher, they go by the belief that they can function as distance teacher as effectively as they do in their classroom, or that their new situation do not make any specific or different types of demands on their skill and attitude. So we cannot blame these teachers for such notions, as such misconceptions are propagated unwittingly by the very bodies or institutions. So, one such institution, for example, in the Indian case, in the University Grant Commission, most distance education programs conducted in India are based on the untenable assumptions that a teacher brought up on and engaged in face-to-face teaching is also an effective distance teacher. So it claims that the assumption has actually been made, and that is the assumption is untenable. So now we shall investigate the validity of the above claims. If they are founded to valid, suggest way to prevent the educational waste that is caused by the above assumptions. First of all, are these claims valid? We have to think are these claims are valid. And secondly, we have to think the and examine the vagueness of UGC guidelines. The two guidelines which are of immediate relevance that the distance teacher may be called upon to perform the following duties: edit, write, revise, and translate lessons. Teach at contact program and evaluate response sheets carefully and thoroughly. These are the UGC guidelines. These three activities are um, completed by the distance tutor. And in order to make distance education effectively, care should be taken. That cares are keep the learners motivated by reducing the time lag behind post reception and the returning of the response. Develop useful sub rapport with the distance learner to mitigate feeling of isolations and to educate the distance learner about the significance of the written assignment. Then failure to differentiate the distance teacher from the conventional teacher. To assert that the distance teacher is faced with the problems of lack of motivation, pangs of isolation, and carelessness towards assignment. So why sample checking? The distance teacher on the other hand has no models to depend on. So it is not without reason that she is never does sample checking. And in distance education, content program is different from classroom teaching. And is the outside expert different from the conventional teacher? In terms of actual job requirement and equation between the conventional teacher and distance teacher just does not exist. So the difficulty which the distance teacher has to face while on his job have not been even been recognized, much less identified or dealt with. And in your model, there are several supplemental communication between the learner and the tutor. Uh, you can follow this in your unit for module 3. And here we discuss some more about the supplemental interaction that are task of the distance teacher and submission of density of assignment and tutorials. So task of distance teacher. The distance teacher should be able to motivate the distance learner to remain on course, help him or her get started again whenever she or gets back because of whatever reasons academic extra academic. Provide feedback to the learner, remove the sense of isolation, stimulate independent and original thinking, help to develop an appropriate attitude. So these are some criteria that should be uh, done by the distance teacher. Submission of density of assignment. There are some research studies which upload this view that by and large the distance learner, the distance institution and the distance teacher agree the two-way communication generated by the work. So studies becomes more stimulating. Studies are best organized as the course get divided appropriately. Learner build a closer acquaintance with the institution. Revision of the course become easier. Learning is enforced through encouragement and tutorials. Tutorials are very important and it allow more time for individual interaction with the teacher. It creates a more congenial academic atmosphere in which all types of learners find it convenient to express themselves and also providing for close relationship among the learners on one hand and between the learners and the teacher on the other hand. So tutorials are very beneficial and very significant for the distance learner. So we now the unit 4 is completed and here we discussed the urgent need to change the policy that have been followed by the correspondence courses and the significance of the supplemental communication in distance education through assignment submission, tutor comments, contact programs, which can and must compensate for the absence of regular or face-to-face contact in a classroom situation. So the supplemental communication is a important part in the distance education system, which accelerates the distance learning system. So thank you very much. We have completed all your modules and all your units, and all the best for your future. And let's in your home you should read your modules and um, become and understood better in a better way for and develop your study skills and follow all the support system for the learner. So thank you very much.